Ukrainian military and civilian prisoners of war arrived back on home soil Wednesday, after Russia and Ukraine exchanged 25 prisoners each under the latest swap brokered by the United Arab Emirates, according to Associated Press. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the swap on his Telegram account. "We will not stop until we get all of our people back," he said. Among the returning prisoners of war are the defenders of Mariupol and Azovstal, Zelensky added.
Russia is using foreigners, lured or tricked into fighting in Ukraine, while the Kremlin is spreading a narrative that it is leading a broad coalition of countries fighting in Ukraine against American imperialism. Politico writes, the publication notes that due to heavy losses at the front, Russia is trying to actively attract foreigners to its army. Although it has had some success in this, it is barely enough to plug some holes. However, foreigners do not give a decisive impetus in favor of Russia in this war. At the same time, the fate of the mercenaries is rather sad. As the Cuban Jog said, he was promised a huge salary by Cuban standards and a Russian passport if he signed a one-year contract with the Russian army. For Cubans, many of whom perceive their country as an open-air prison, the promise of a second passport was perhaps the main temptation. However, the Russian promises, as always, turned out to be a deception. Now they tell us that since we are Russian citizens, we must continue to fight until the end of the war, said Jog, who is now in the Kursk region. None of the Cuban mercenaries interviewed by Politico cited ideological motives as a reason to join the Russian army. Many claimed that they were hired for work that had nothing to do with the war at all, for example, construction. At least that's what they promised, and those who consciously joined the army believed that it would really be a one-year contract. "They are using citizenship to tie us down. It looks like blackmail to me," said Cuban mercenary David, whose contract ended last summer. The Cubans also complained that the commanders took away their Cuban documents and their brand new Russian passports. Some were never given them at all. As Politico notes, while many Cubans said they were being used in rear positions to dig trenches and fortifications in Russian-occupied areas of eastern Ukraine, others were deployed on the front lines of the offensive, particularly in Kursk. As media wrote, the most famous group of foreigners participating in Russia's war of conquest against Ukraine are North Koreans. Recently, 2 of them were captured by Ukrainians, where they said they were being taken to training exercises, but suddenly found themselves at war. But the Russian army does not only employ mercenaries from the poorest countries in the world, there are also citizens of fairly rich countries. We recently reported how an Italian citizen was captured by the Ukrainian armed forces.
Another raid against migrants was conducted in the Princess Plaza shopping center in the Russian capital, Moscow. The Russian Baza Telegram channel reported this. Police and Russian Guard officers who arrived at the area discovered and detained hundreds of migrants in the shopping center. The detained persons were lined up and removed from the area, and were taken to the police station in police cars to have their documents checked. According to the information, the actions of law enforcement agencies were designed to verify the legality of migrants' stay in Russia. It should be noted that last year, more than 10 new laws were adopted in Russia in the field of regulating the migration process. Among them is the reduction of the period of temporary stay in Russia. According to some reports, migrants facing the threat of deportation are offered to sign a contract with the army and go to war in Ukraine.
China is building special landing barges likely designed to transport People's Liberation Army military equipment to the shores of Taiwan, which could indicate an intention to launch a full-scale invasion of the island, military observer David Axe writes in The Telegraph. He noted that the first to report on the construction of the 5 barges was Naval News, which said the barges have been in development since at least 2022 and represent a new and important capability for Chinese forces. Military observers recall that over the decades, the Chinese Navy has built up a sizable amphibious flotilla, which includes 8 Type 071 landing docks for transporting troops and supplies, at least 3 Type 075 assault ships for transporting troops and helicopters, and, so far, 1 giant Type 076 landing ship that can also launch and land highly capable drones. But those forces were probably too small to land enough troops and equipment on Taiwan's shores, the expert suggests, citing analysts' data that China would need to transport 2 million people across the strait to guarantee victory. So, to bolster its amphibious forces, the People's Liberation Army of China, PLA, plans to commission hundreds of commercial vessels, including car ferries. These vessels could roughly triple the capacity of China's amphibious forces, the observer believes. He points out that the 2017 National Defense Transportation Law stipulates that all of China's transportation infrastructure, including ships, is available for military use. Naval engineers have begun modifying key vessels to make them better assault ships, including adding heavy-duty ramps that can support the weight of armored vehicles, Axe notes. But strengthening the ramps doesn't solve the underlying problem. How is a car ferry supposed to get close to shore to lower its ramp onto land? Ferries are designed to dock at piers and lower their ramps onto concrete, Axe said. He suggested that the PLA could bring in its civilian assault force by seizing a Taiwanese port, but well-defended ports are hard targets. In his view, the new assault barges are key to connecting car ferries and other civilian vessels to sandy beaches. The barge is essentially a floating pier. The ferry can stop nearby, lower a ramp onto the top of the barge and unload vehicles, the expert explains. He noted that while these Chinese barges are less vulnerable to strong winds and waves, they will still be vulnerable to enemy fire. However, for the Chinese, the analyst notes, this is not a problem because Chinese industry has already proven that it can build additional copies in a few months. Axe believes that these new barges are the final warning signal that an attack on Taiwan is imminent. If the invasion begins, the barges could be the reason for its success.